Around 60,000 years ago, on the vast icy plains of Paleolithic Europe, there were no brightly lit windows with golden crowns, nor digital menus promising meals in minutes. No scent of frying food wafted from busy avenues, but under the star-dusted night sky, around a bonfire crackling with ancient oak wood, something rare and symbolic was taking shape, a ritual that blended food, honor, and belonging into a feast fit for the tribe's most skilled hunters. A hunter returns through the morning mist, his muscles tense under animal hides, carrying a magnificent prize on his shoulders, a 1,700-pound European bison, its tusks still dripping with warm blood that contrasted with the frigid air. The eyes of the group light up like embers, not just for the promise of fresh meat that will ensure their survival for weeks, but because everyone knows instinctively that this singular moment will define social hierarchies, seal political alliances, and crown a temporary king of food. What you are witnessing is the birth of humanity's first Burger King, not a global franchise with thousands of outlets, but an organic and brutal ancestral system where whoever controlled the juiciest meat, whoever mastered the secrets of preparing the best burgers from wild game ground on stone, and whoever knew how to offer the choicest cuts at the right rituals and at the perfect moment, that person became the true king of the Paleolithic table. But how exactly did this primitive food royalty work? What were the secret codes that determined who ascended to the culinary throne? And what does this ancestral carnivorous hierarchy reveal about our modern culinary obsessions, our fast food rituals, and our eternal search for that flavor that connects us to something greater than ourselves? The first kings of meat. Between 45,000 and 12,000 years ago, during the peak of the Upper Paleolithic period, our ancestors developed something that would forever change the course of human evolution: the politics of meat. We're not just talking about food, we're talking about power, status, diplomacy, and even primitive sexuality, all revolving around who controlled the most valuable proteins. Archaeologists like Richard Wrangham of Harvard University and Brian Hayden of Simon Fraser University discovered through decades of excavations that the control of food, especially cooked meat, was absolutely fundamental to establishing the first complex human social hierarchies. The data is impressive. Archaeological sites show that groups with consistent access to large quantities of meat developed more sophisticated tools, more elaborate art, and more stable social structures. Imagine Grok, a skilled Cro-Magnon hunter who lived 35,000 years ago on the plains of what is now France. His body is a hunting machine, 5'9", tall, with muscles defined by decades of chasing megafauna, scars that tell stories of confrontations with cave lions and woolly rhinos. When he returned with a 4-ton woolly mammoth, enough to feed 50 people for an entire month, he wasn't just bringing food, he was bringing pure political capital. The distribution of this meat followed complex unwritten rules, but they were etched into the social DNA of the group. First, the elders and shamans, the guardians of tribal memory and spiritual knowledge. Then, the nursing and pregnant mothers, the genetic future of the tribe. Next, the young warriors who protected the territory. And finally, the children and adolescents. Grok, as the main provider, had the sacred right to choose the choicest cuts: the mammoth's heart, rich in vitamins, the liver, full of iron, the marrow from the long bones, essential fats for the brain, the Paleolithic equivalent of a double bacon whopper with a large fry. Archaeological evidence from sites like Dolní Věstonice in what is now the Czech Republic paints a fascinating picture of this hierarchical society. There, archaeologists discovered monumental central hearths, true altars of meat, surrounded by specific organized areas for processing different types of animal protein. Each zone had its function: butchering, cooking, smoking, storage. The prehistoric chefs of this site created their specialties with tools that would make any modern butcher's cleaver envious: flint blades with edges just 0.1 millimeters thick, specialized scrapers for different types of hides and meat, and spearheads balanced with millimeter precision. And yes, they created the first burgers in history. Meat ground using special stones, mixed with melted animal fat, seasoned with mineral salt and wild herbs, molded into perfect discs, and roasted over controlled temperature embers. Spectrographic analysis of the ash from these hearths reveals surprising temperature control. They knew exactly how to maintain embers at 400 degrees, 200 degrees, for slow cooking, or how to create flames of 750 degrees, 400 degrees C, to quickly sear the surface of the meat. It was a culinary science that took millennia to be rediscovered. The Paleolithic royal menu. But what exactly was on the menu of these primitive food kings? If you could travel back in time and sit at the royal table of a Paleolithic leader, what would you find? Revolutionary research led by anthropologist Kristen Hawkes of the University of Utah and archaeologist Louis Binford reveals a culinary system much more sophisticated, diverse, and flavorful than we ever imagined. The Paleolithic royal menu wasn't just about survival, it was ancestral, haute cuisine. At the top of the list, the most prestigious dish, Mammoth Burger Deluxe. Mammoth meat finely ground with specialized stone hammers, mixed with rich marrow extracted from heated long bones, seasoned with a selection of wild herbs, sage, primitive thyme, birch leaves, and mineral salt extracted from natural deposits. The patty was hand-molded and grilled on preheated volcanic stones that maintained a constant temperature. There was also the Reindeer Royale, fillets of reindeer from the Arctic tundras, marinated for days in naturally fermented bear fat, a process that created acids to tenderize the meat, seasoned with specific flower pollen and grilled slowly on quartzite stones that radiated uniform heat. The result? Meat that melted in your mouth with complex flavors that no modern restaurant has been able to replicate. And the absolute house specialty, reserved only for special occasions, ancestral buffalo wings, not metaphorically, but literally, the wings of a 6-foot wingspan steppe bison, roasted slowly in underground pits, lined with heated stones, seasoned with a secret mix of sea salt, obtained through trade with coastal groups, dried algae, rich in umami, and fermented conifer pollen that added unique smoky notes. Archaeological sites like Shanidar in what is now Iraq have revealed the remains of these elaborate meals from up to 60,000 years ago. The bones tell stories. Specific cut marks made with specialized blades, evidence of cooking at multiple temperatures, and even more impressively, microscopic remains of seasonings. Pollen from 8 different species of flowers was deliberately added to the meat, not by chance, but following recipes passed down orally through generations. Chemical analyses conducted by Dr. Amanda Henry's team at the Max Planck Institute identified complex aromatic compounds in 45,000-year-old stone bowls. These containers held traces of animal fats mixed with essential plant oils, direct evidence that our ancestors created elaborate sauces, marinades, and seasonings. A 45,000-year-old recipe had at least 12 different ingredients. The most fascinating part, these Paleolithic kings of meat already practiced something eerily similar to the modern franchise system. Human groups spread across 3 different continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, independently developed almost identical preparation techniques, creating the first quality standards for human food. A mammoth burger prepared in Siberia followed surprisingly similar protocols to those used in Paleolithic France or Spain. Evidence of long-distance trade shows that premium ingredients traveled hundreds of miles. Sea salt found at inland sites, shells used as seasoning containers, volcanic obsidian for the best cutting knives. It was a primitive global supply network that ensured food kings always had access to the best ingredients, no matter where they were. The Block 3 food coronation rituals. But the true power of these Paleolithic kings didn't just lie in their ability to hunt mammoths or cook perfect fillets. It was in the rituals, the sacred ceremonies, that transformed a simple act of eating into a political, spiritual, and social event that defined the fate of entire tribes. Revolutionary ethno-archaeological studies of groups like the Hadza in Tanzania, who maintain hunting and gathering practices almost identical to our Paleolithic ancestors, reveal complex food coronation ceremonies that have survived for tens of thousands of years. Anthropologist Kristen Hawkes spent decades living with these groups, documenting rituals that are direct windows into the past. When an exceptionally skilled hunter, let's call him Urok, returned to the camp with a truly grand prize, a mammoth, a woolly rhino, or a giant bison, the group didn't just divide the meat and eat. No, they performed what we can call the Paleolithic Burger King coronation ceremony, a ritual that lasted 3 days and 3 nights. First night, purification. Urok was taken to a sacred river or spring, where he was ritually cleansed by the tribe's elders. His hunting weapons were polished, his battle scars painted with red ochre and charcoal, his hair braided with eagle feathers and the teeth of predators he had faced. He was not allowed to eat anything, a total fast to purify his spirit before becoming the sacred provider. Second night, ritual preparation of the meat. While Urok meditated in isolation, the most experienced women of the tribe, true Paleolithic chefs, began the ceremonial processing of the prey. Each cut was made following ancestral traditions. First the heart, offered to the gods, then the liver for the spirits of the ancestors, and then the main muscles for the tribe. Nothing was wasted. Bones would be turned into tools, hide into clothing, and fat into fuel for torches. Third night, the coronation itself. At sunset, Urok returned to the tribe's circle. And here comes the most impressive detail. He was literally given a crown, made of artistically intertwined bison ribs, decorated with polished horns and tied with sinew. This bone crown was placed on his head during a celebration that included dances, chants, and the communal consumption of the best cuts of the prey. Evidence of these practices appears magnificently preserved in the cave paintings of Lascaux, France, and Altamira, Spain. Human figures are depicted with elaborate horn and bone ornaments during explicit scenes of ritual meat consumption. The archaeologist Jean Clotz, who spent his life studying these images, interprets these paintings as the first photographic records of food hierarchies, the first restaurant rankings of humanity, etched in stone 17,000 years ago. Anthropologist Christopher Boehm of the University of Southern California discovered through comparative studies that these rituals served a genius dual function. They celebrated and rewarded individual success, motivating others to become better hunters, while also dramatically reinforcing group cooperation. The temporary king of food received extraordinary privileges, first choice of the meat, preferential mating rights, influence in tribal decisions, but also took on sacred responsibilities, ensuring that everyone was fed, especially children, the elderly and the sick during times of scarcity. Recent discoveries show that these food reigns were not permanent. Analysis of dental wear on Paleolithic skeletons suggests that the status of meat king rotated among different individuals throughout the year, based on the type of prey captured and the season. One hunter could be king during mammoth season, winter, another during bison season, spring, creating a primitive democratic system based on specific competence. But perhaps the most touching aspect of these rituals was the emotional reciprocity. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups show that the crowned king didn't just distribute meat. He distributed hope, security, and group identity. He was a temporary leader, but also a living symbol that, no matter how hard Paleolithic life was, there would always be someone willing to risk everything to ensure the tribe's survival and prosperity. The War of Culinary Territories. Like every successful enterprise, the Paleolithic burger kings faced fierce and often deadly competition. Rival groups didn't just fight over hunting territories or water sources, they waged real wars for the most valuable culinary secrets, for the trade routes that supplied exotic spices, and for the right to control the most profitable franchises of Paleolithic food. Dramatic evidence of these intergroup conflicts appears at sites like Jebel Sahaba in what is now Sudan, dating back 13,400 years ago, one of humanity's first war cemeteries. There, archaeologists discovered 59 skeletons, including women and children, with brutal injuries from spearheads, flint knives, and bone clubs. But here's the fascinating detail. Many of these deadly confrontations occurred precisely near areas rich in specific food resources: seasonal fish runs, reindeer migration routes, mineral salt deposits. Paleontologist Tim White of the University of California identified revealing patterns through forensic analysis of these skeletons. They weren't random conflicts. They were prehistoric fast food wars, organized disputes for control of territories that guaranteed access to the most valuable ingredients. A group that controlled a mammoth-rich region had an advantage over those limited to small deer. It was primitive culinary economics in its most brutal form. Imagine the Great Salt War of 30,000 years ago, fought between two Cro-Magnon groups in the Pyrenees Mountains. On one side, Korak's tribe, which for generations had controlled natural deposits of mineral salt essential for preserving meat during harsh winters. On the other, Vorgak's tribe, which dominated superior mammoth hunting techniques but relied on trade to obtain salt. For years, the two groups maintained a balanced exchange, salt for mammoth meat. But when Vorgak began to intercept salt trade caravans and train spies to discover the secret location of the mines, the situation exploded into violence. Epic battles were fought not for common territory, but for the right to add those precious crystals that transformed ordinary meat into delicacies that could be stored for months. But these culinary wars also generated innovation at an impressive pace. Evolutionary pressures forced these primitive chefs to continually develop new techniques to gain a competitive advantage. Smoking methods for long-term preservation, controlled fermentation that created unique flavors impossible to replicate, and increasingly elaborate and secret spice blends. It was a culinary arms race that lasted for millennia. Groups that mastered superior meat preparation techniques even developed specialized weapons. Spearheads designed specifically to pierce vital organs without damaging the surrounding meat, knives with precise curves for different types of butchering, and harpoons with barbs that allowed them to capture large fish without destroying the meat's texture. Each innovation was a jealously guarded trade secret. Archaeological records suggest an epic battle of the secret ingredients 25,000 years ago in the region that is now Germany. Two rival tribes, one specialized in mammoths, the other in bison, simultaneously discovered that certain specific alpine herbs created extraordinary flavors when mixed with heated animal fat. What followed was a 3-decade war for control of the mountains where these plants grew. Evidence shows that rival groups even practiced food sabotage, poisoning water sources near enemy camps, setting fire to areas where seasoning plants were gathered, and in extreme cases, specifically attacking the most talented chefs of rival tribes. It was psychological warfare. Without their culinary masters, a group could have all the meat in the world, but it wouldn't have the knowledge to turn it into food that sustained morale and social hierarchy. The result? Groups that mastered superior meat preparation techniques had exponential territorial advantages. They attracted more members, including defectors from rival tribes seduced by better food, formed stronger alliances through culinary diplomacy, and expanded their franchise territories more quickly. Some groups became true Paleolithic food empires, controlling trade routes that extended for hundreds of miles. These ancient culinary wars left deep marks on our behavioral DNA. Our modern obsession with secret recipes, with chefs competing on TV shows, with restaurants guarding techniques as trade secrets, all of these are direct echoes of those primitive battles where mastering the art of preparing meat literally meant the difference between life and death, between power and submission. The decline of the kings and the birth of agriculture. But like all empires in history, from Rome to Blockbuster itself, the reign of the Paleolithic Burger Kings had an inevitable expiration date written in the stars and in the changing climate. Between 12,000 and 10,000 years ago, dramatic climate changes and the mass extinction of megafauna radically transformed not only the physical landscape, but the entire business model of human food. Analysis of Greenland ice cores reveals the drama that unfolded. Global temperatures rose 13 degrees Celsius, 7 degrees Celsius in just a few decades. Continental glaciers that had existed for 100,000 years melted in a matter of centuries. Sea levels rose 400 feet, 120 meters. Icy tundras turned into temperate forests. For the Paleolithic meat kings, it was literally the end of the world as they knew it. The great mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant bison, cave lions, the true stars of the Paleolithic menu, began to disappear one by one, like restaurants closing in a global economic crisis. The last Siberian mammoth died 4,000 years ago on an isolated island, but most of the megafauna had disappeared much earlier, between 12,000 and 8,000 years ago. Imagine the existential crisis faced by Urok Jr., the grandson of the great mammoth hunter Urok. He had trained since childhood to be a meat king, learning the secrets of tracking, hunting, and preparing gigantic prey. His tools were designed for 6-ton mammoths. His culinary techniques depended on massive quantities of fat and protein. His social authority came from his ability to feed 50 people with a single hunt. But now, in a world without megafauna, Urok Jr. found himself hunting rabbits, birds, and small fish, prey that required completely different techniques, provided much less meat, and, crucially, did not generate the social prestige needed to maintain his leadership position. It was like a Kodak CEO trying to understand digital cameras. The technological shift was too radical for rapid adaptation. The answer came from an unexpected direction, not from the great hunters, but from marginalized groups who had been forced to innovate out of necessity. The Natufians of the Levant, 11,500 years ago, were initially considered losers in the Paleolithic hierarchy, groups that could not compete effectively in megafauna hunting and were pushed into less desirable territories. But these losers discovered something revolutionary. Wild cereals like einkorn wheat and barley could be deliberately cultivated, harvested, and stored. It was the birth of a completely new business model. Instead of occasionally hunting giant prey that could feed the tribe for weeks, they could produce food consistently, predictably, and scalably all year round. Archaeological evidence, Göbekli Tepe. The site of Göbekli Tepe in what is now Turkey, built 11,600 years ago, represents this dramatic transition. Megalithic monuments erected by groups that already practiced proto-agriculture but still maintained ritual hunting traditions. It was literally a mixed franchise, a McDonald's that still served traditional gourmet dishes alongside the new standardized products. The archaeologists Gordon Hillman and Stuart Davies discovered fascinating evidence of this transition in the Euphrates Valley. Archaeological sites where specialized hunting tools, spearheads for mammoths, harpoons for giant fish, are found side by side with the first primitive agricultural equipment, flint sickles, pestles for processing grains, and underground storage silos. Old guard versus innovators' evidence suggests dramatic tensions between the old guard of the meat kings and the new agricultural entrepreneurs. Skeletons from some sites show injuries that seem to result from internal conflicts, possibly confrontations between traditionalists who insisted on maintaining hierarchies based on hunting and revolutionaries who proposed systems based on the control of cultivated grains. But agriculture had a devastating competitive advantage: scalability. A skilled hunter could feed 50 people a few times a year. A competent farmer could feed 200 people consistently throughout the year. It was like comparing a craft shop with a factory. There was no possible competition in terms of volume. Gradually, a new class of kings emerged, no longer the masters of meat, but the controllers of grains. They mastered different secrets: when to plant, how to store, where to locate silos, how to distribute seeds. It was a silent revolution that would forever change the nature of human power. Ironically, analysis of skeletons shows that this transition to agriculture initially worsened human nutrition. The Paleolithic meat kings were taller, stronger, had healthier teeth and denser bones than the first farmers. But in terms of political power and social stability, agriculture was unbeatable. It was better to have guaranteed mediocre food than uncertain, exceptional food. Paleolithic DNA in our modern obsessions. But have we truly left behind these primitive food kings? Or have they simply evolved, adapted their bone crowns to paper hats, and traded their bonfires for high-tech grills? Look around you, at your own obsessions, your daily rituals, your visceral reactions to food. The truth is surprising. Our obsessions with culinary hierarchies, with celebrity chefs, with five-star restaurants, with the quasi-religious ritual of crowning the best burgers, all of these are direct, almost genetic echoes of those Paleolithic fires from 40,000 years ago. Revolutionary studies in evolutionary neuroscience, such as those conducted by Dr. Kevin Leyland of the University of St. Andrews and Dr. Sarah Hrdy of Harvard, show something spectacular. Our brains still respond to the same primitive stimuli with almost frightening precision. When you smell grilling meat, it's not just your taste buds reacting. It's primitive reward centers in your brain, the same ones that were activated when Urok returned with a mammoth. In controlled experiments, when volunteers are exposed to the aroma of cooking animal protein, MRI scans show immediate activation of the amygdala, center of primitive emotions, the hypothalamus, hormonal control, and the orbitofrontal cortex, social reward processing. It's the exact same neural pattern that higher primates exhibit when exposed to signals of high-quality food, just amplified by human cultural evolution. Even more fascinating, anthropological studies show that sharing meals still strengthens social bonds through the same Paleolithic neurochemical mechanisms. When we eat together, our brains release oxytocin, the trust hormone, dopamine, pleasure and reward, and endorphins, well-being. It's literally the same hormonal cocktail that kept Paleolithic tribes united around the campfire. And yes, we still subconsciously look for food alphas to follow. Why do certain chefs become celebrities, while others, equally talented, remain anonymous? Studies in evolutionary psychology suggest that we automatically look for signs of culinary dominance, confidence, technical skill, the ability to feed the tribe. It's the same mental algorithm our ancestors used to identify the best hunter providers. The very structure of the modern Burger King perfectly, and not by chance, replicates the original Paleolithic model. Observe the parallels. A clear and visible hierarchy, the king as a symbol of food authority, standardized products that mimic primitive techniques, ground beef burgers, exactly like the first mammoth patties, territorial distribution through franchises, like tribal hunting territories, and specific rituals of consumption, the symbolic act of crowning the dining experience with the Whopper. Even modern marketing exploits deep Paleolithic instincts. Why does the slogan "Have it your way" work so well? Because it echoes the ancestral privilege of the meat kings to choose the best cuts. Why does the image of a king resonate as a symbol of a fast food chain? Because it activates genetic memories of leadership based on food provision. Our modern obsession with comfort food, foods that emotionally calm us, is directly linked to the Paleolithic associations between carefully prepared meat and tribal security. Studies show that stressed people specifically seek out foods rich in fat and protein, prepared in ways that resemble traditional techniques, grilled, roasted, slow-cooked. It's the Paleolithic brain looking for the security of the tribal bonfire. Even our obsession with quality meat, premium cuts, Michelin-starred restaurants, the concept of fine dining, are direct inheritances from those first meat kings. The difference between a McDonald's and a five-star restaurant isn't just about taste, it's about status, about the same social hierarchy that determined who received the mammoth's heart versus who got the leftovers. Observe a modern family barbecue and you will see the Paleolithic ceremony in action. The king of the grill, usually the family's alpha male, controlling the fire, choosing the cuts, and distributing the meat according to subtle family hierarchies. The children watch with reverence, learning not just about cooking but about power, provision, and social place. The fascinating paradox is that we live in an era of unprecedented food abundance in human history, but our brains still operate with Paleolithic scarcity software. That's why we feel disproportionate pleasure when we find a burger deal, why we subconsciously compete for tables at the best restaurants, and why some foods make us feel more important than others. Even delivery apps like Uber Eats and DoorDash replicate Paleolithic patterns. The anticipation of the hunt, choosing the restaurant, the anxious wait, tracking the order, and the social reward, sharing the meal. It's digitized hunting and gathering with the same neural reward circuits. Eternal kings of an ancestral feast. So the next time you're in a drive-through line, patiently waiting for your burger as the aroma of grilled meat floats through your car's air conditioning, stop for a moment. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Remember, you are not just buying fast food. You are participating in a sacred ritual that began 40,000 years ago, when our ancestors discovered that food is not just fuel. It is community, it is power, it is love transformed into sustenance. You are honoring kings who never wore polished gold crowns or crystal scepters, but who were crowned with intertwined bison ribs and wielded scepters made of mammoth bones. You are continuing a tradition that survived the extinction of mammoths, the brutal end of the Ice Age, the tumultuous birth of civilization, industrial revolutions, world wars, the digital age, and that will continue long after us. Because deep down, far beyond the layers of culture, technology, and progress, we are all still those primitive humans gathered around the sacred fire. We still wait, with the same ancestral anxiety for someone, the best hunter, the most skilled chef, the temporary king of food, to offer us not just physical sustenance but something much deeper, belonging, identity, the certainty that we are not alone in this vast and indifferent universe. When a mother lovingly prepares her child's lunch, she is channeling millions of years of maternal provisioning instinct. When a father masters the grill on the weekend, he is, without realizing it, reassuming the ancestral role of the tribe's alpha provider. When friends gather to share a pizza, they are recreating the communal circles that have defined our species since the beginning. The meat may have changed, from mammoth to beef, from bison to processed chicken. The technology may have evolved exponentially, from wood bonfires to digital precision grills. The containers may have transformed, from animal skulls to biodegradable packaging. But the ancestral hunger for community, for clear hierarchy, for flavor that connects us to something greater than our own individual existence, remains exactly the same. The Paleolithic food kings never truly disappeared. They simply evolved, adapted, modernized. They traded open bonfires for industrial kitchens, caves for air-conditioned restaurants, and bone crowns for disposable paper hats. But they continue to reign with the same authority.